Right, right. All right, YouTube. Hello, once again, Triple A here, giving you another podcast. Today we're going to talk about some taxes and more. We've got once again returning guest Duff, a new guest Crow, returning guest JP, and a new guest named John. Guys, down the line, give a shout out.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi. John, you're muted.
Say hello, John.
What's going on, everybody?
There we go. Okay, that's great. Anyway, tonight we're starting the conversation on with taxes. We'll get to a few more subjects, but of course, if anyone out there does not know already, there's been a giant bill passed right now. Actually, happened I think last night even about the tax bill with the Republicans having 51 to 49 passing, and a lot of controversy over that. I will freely admit that I am not an expert on what is in the bill, what happened, and all that stuff, but it looks like it's from the people that I've seen and heard from on the news organizations that I've watched. They say it looks pretty good, but again, I don't know what all's in that, so it's pretty well, and let's hope that it actually does lower our taxes, because that'd be the first change we've had in the country for decades, which is a little bit crazy there. And so yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. It has to go through some legislation and get signed to become law, but so for the best. But anyway, I want to go down the line real quick and see what everyone else thinks. So looks like okay. You know what? We'll skip over. We'll go to a Crow or anything so far.
Yeah, my ideas when this comes to this tax bill is that it's not very good. You have to cut spending, because whenever you cut taxes and keep spending around, it makes the government feel like it's less expensive than it actually is. So it makes people want to support more spending, which is not good. So my proposal would be very simple. Just basically implement a flat tax, then lift the rate up or down to whatever it takes to reach 105% of government spending. I guarantee that people will start to support less spending if you just did that one thing.
Interesting. Gotcha. Going back and your mic's off. So okay, John, any thoughts there?
I pretty much go along with his statement to pretty much, you said 105% to cover what the government spends?
Yeah.
I mean, I just think they need to reduce spending and figure out a way to not have so much debt. I don't know if this is going to fix all the problems.
Fair enough. That's well, I mean, I don't think there's a quick fix. I do hope that we are on the road to better, bigger things and whatnot. We'll see, but unfortunately, as it sounds like, there's not been a lot going on in general, so maybe this is one step in the right direction, potentially. Any thoughts there, JP?
I'm really curious to hear what Duff's going to say, but I'll say this much. I don't really know much about all of the details. I'm sure there are some things squeezed in that bill that shouldn't be, and I'm sure there are some fundamental I'll just stick with that. I'm sure there's probably going to be some things squeezed in that bill that don't need to be, that don't make sense. I think I heard somebody mention how like private jet rides are tax deductible. And if that's as the bill has it, that's kind of strange. I think saying things like, transportation for business reasons is deductible. That's like a broad enough category. It fits everybody. But if there is anything in there that says like specifically private jet rides for business are tax deductible, I think that kind of stuff is silly. My biggest thought around all of this is it seems that no matter what you do to try to fix our current tax system, you are going to increase the tax on the poorest people, because we have a progressive tax system and they are in the lowest tax bracket. So even a flat tax, which I'm actually in favor of, means raising the taxes for the poorest people. And it means lowering the tax rate for the richest people. So I noticed that a lot of chatter on Twitter is mostly around how insensitive the Republicans are because they're raising taxes on the lowest bracket. But I feel like if you understood anything about mathematics, you would know to get out of the shitty tax system we're in now, you have to do that. Which is why, to add to Crow's thing. I haven't even considered I mean, not that I haven't considered reducing spending, but I've never considered reducing spending as something that needs to accompany a flat tax. But I do think in the case of a flat tax is the one time UBI actually makes sense as a way to make up for what you lose from the progressive tax system. And I think that if we had some sort of universal basic income for accompanied with a flat tax, then the left should have almost nothing to complain about. That's kind of how I'm thinking about this.
They'll find something, I'm sure.
Russia actually has a very successful flat tax. I don't know if it would work here, but they say they actually made out well.
Potentially, yeah, that makes sense. Any thoughts there, Duff?
Actually, what John just mentioned is interesting. I'm always somewhat skeptical of the data that we get out of Russia. I think there's a lot of government interference in just sort of what happens. And when it comes to flat taxes, I think a lot of people want to go that way. But as you say, JP, it's hard to sell as political capital because, of course, that will always mean that people on the lower end will be paying a great deal more. And the way we think about that is that's unfair because they have so little to begin with. But I would argue that that's a bit of a fallacy because from where I'm sitting up here in Canada, it's like I want good service and good value for my money. So if I am getting something which is good out of what I am paying within reason, I'm willing to say that's okay. I don't fall into the camp that says taxation by definition is legalized extortion, but I do want to be able to look at the paper and say, hey, look, I have good healthcare, I have good roads, I have this, I have security, and everybody's paying approximately the same tax rate, but getting access to exactly the same benefits. I don't really have an issue with that.
Yeah, I mean,
Really?
the idea of if you make $1, you pay 30 cents or 40 cents or whatever it is, that is like the most, I consider myself quite egalitarian. That is the most fair way to go about it. And there's still the incentive to make a lot more money. I mean, if you make $1 million, you might have to give 400,000 back. But I don't think, the fact that you still have $600,000 matters. And another case I usually make for flat tax is in relation to each other. When that flat tax percentage changes, like say it's 25%, but then we realize, you know what, we really need it to be 30%. Like say that's something that gets voted on. Although, yes, you are giving more money back to your state/country, whatever, in relation to each other, your ranking stays exactly the same. Like if you are the richest person in the world, you're still the richest person in the world. And taking, an additional 5% of your money and putting it away, well, everybody's taking an additional 5% of the money and putting it away. You would imagine that the economy it would be much easier to scale the economy that way than having like 17 different tax brackets,
Now, here's an interesting aside. I'd love to get your opinion on this, guys. So if corporations who, under the new tax structure which is being put forward by the states, would seem to be the primary beneficiaries, their tax is lowering quite a bit, whereas high-income earners is actually going up. But if corporations were to say, we are actually citizens as well under the law, the flat tax should apply to us too. And the net result of that would be actually they pay less tax. Would you guys be okay with that?
Depends on the true benefits that we receive. I think companies like Apple, instead of using loopholes and going through all of this to reduce what they get taxed on, I think if we have an acceptable rate for them, I think they should bring that tax money back here instead of other countries.
Well, so yeah, I think it would make sense for corporations to pay the same exact tax. Like if we had a flat tax and it was, let's not even care about the percent yet. I think people and corporations should pay the same tax, absolutely. And the reason is I think the problems that come out of that are much more interesting. if everyone, if it's that easy, like, hey, every dollar you make, you pay this much back to your state or country, then I just feel like you're simplifying the problem so much that there's probably a lot of savings in resource management that we can't even imagine right now. We could fire the entire IRS, first of all. I don't see why we would IRS if the taxes were this simple. And they could do something a little bit more productive in society, hopefully, rather than just audit people all day. So yeah, I just feel like I don't see a problem with that. I think companies should be able to have the same rates as people. Now, since they're paying less, that might mean everybody's percentage goes up. And the only downside I can see to this is psychological. Some people might not understand the mathematics of it, and it might be disincentivizing them to start businesses. I don't know though.
That's potentially a thing. Just to that, since you mentioned that everyone should get that. A few months ago went to a YAL talk, and the gentleman there, he was a doctorate in economy. I think he was from OU, and he was describing the flat tax kind of rate and talked about. He looked at numbers from like 100 years from people paying into taxes, and he described that when you hit a certain point at about 15-16%, then that's the highest in order to kind of get more money out of the people, because once you hit that number, then I guess people lose the incentive to do more, and that's the point to say, hey, you know what, I'd rather just go and get my money in another get it another way, not give it back to the government. So they just find, okay, hey, you know what, at 16%, I'm gonna go to the, I don't know, Cayman Islands and just store it away. And so I mean, I guess so they use that number to say this is the best we're gonna do. And yeah, I guess it's a bit ridiculous to charge more than that, because I mean that's just the moral equivalent of, oh hey, you know, I charge them more, so in theory we get more, but not a deal. But in that regard, are not sorry, what?
Sorry, finish your thought there, AAA.
No, okay, I was gonna say, I do think that the flat tax would be great, but I guess my new question to you guys is, and this isn't really going on the plus or minus of taxes. It's just saying, if you were in charge of the tax code, what I mean, are there? I'm sure we all can agree on basic things to be taxed and things we don't need to have taxed. But what would you guys? And I'll throw it to Crow first, since it's been a while. What would you say would be the only top things that should be taxed if you were in charge?
To be honest, I would have a flat consumption tax, to be honest, because that'll discourage consumption and encourage more saving, which is good for the economy because it leads to increased capital investment. Because you have to understand where the capital and capitalism comes from. It comes from investment, and savings funds make for more investment.
So wait, are you when you say consumption, you mean like a sales tax?
Yeah, national sales tax.
So would you do away with income tax?
Yeah, just get rid of everything else, just a flat consumption tax. And it lifts up or down depending on what it takes to reach 105% of federal spending. Because we have to start paying off this debt.
Wow.
Right, and it also arguably would help keep prices down. People won't spend as much. I mean, if that's true, they're saving under what you said. But also, I just feel like, $100 TV or $100 TV, imagine $1,000 TV at 40%. Like, I just feel like, actually, yeah, that's a good question. Do you think it would keep prices down, or would it increase?
Well, if you're getting rid of all the other taxes, it would basically balance out.
Right, that is true.
Isn't that decentivizing spending money, which is, I hear on the media all the time, like, you need people to spend their money. If they start holding it back, it causes other problems.
Well, no, reducing spending isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, like I said, if you take a look at where you have investment for capital, it comes from savings. So saving is actually good, especially when you look at the future benefits of saving, when people don't have to turn to Social Security when they're older because they save money because they cut their spending.
Well, Oh,
because
good.
they're disincentivized to spend because of the consumption tax. So there you go.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like when you're saving money, it's not like your money isn't being spent. Like it's your money is being used. It's being invested in things. It's just you're not spending it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, theoretically, like if everyone kept their money in a vault and didn't spend it, and there was no investment being made with it, that I could see causing some problems. But if you have it in either in stock or in a savings account or anything that is actually being used to help fund things that are of value, then I don't see a problem with saving at all.
Yeah, that's where I'd actually jump in with an example here. So one of the problems with the 1929 stock market crash, other than a lot of lending on margin, was that people didn't put their money into the market. A lot of the hard assets and hard cash which they had literally went under the bed or into a jar. So there wasn't any money for the bank to invest to try and make investments in the economy to get it going again. So the trick is you do want to encourage savings, but by removing either entitlements or tax write-offs, what you're also trying to promote is people to spend their money more wisely. I think it may be a little bit overgeneralized, but the thought is that if you are writing off people's poverty, they will spend their money on the wrong things. And I think there's some limitations to that sort of idea. But if we didn't allow you to write off a section of what you haven't made, and you're going to be taxed anyways within reason, then hopefully that's an incentive for better consumer behavior, putting your money into not just your savings account, but into, let's say, what would your example be of, oh shoot, what are they called? Mutual funds and whatnot instead. So trying to get your money to do more, but also allowing people to keep a hold of more of their money in order to do that as well. Is that kind of what we're getting at there, Crow and JP?
Well, yeah, basically putting your money into a savings account. I mean, if people are disincentivized to spend by a consumption tax, then they'll put their money into savings. And you can put that into a mutual fund, I guess. Yeah. Or an IRA.
Interesting. Oh, sorry, do you have anything to add on there, John?
No, I think you guys covered it.
That sounds good. And just a real quick side note there. Hey, Crow, so you were talking about the sales tax. Just curious because I know that in states here we don't usually see that on the price tag of products. So would you potentially want to have that included in that price, or is that still at the end?
Yeah, no, put it on the price tag. That makes the most sense.
Honestly though, with a flat tax, it wouldn't. I mean, I would still like to see it, but it'd be a lot easier to calculate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And I would imagine, actually, here's a good follow-up, Crow. Would you accept a flat tax at the federal level and a flat tax at the state level for sales?
Yeah, I think that it will be fine. I mean, it makes the most sense. If you're going to tax anything, it would make sense to tax consumption and reduce spending too.
Right. And then I don't know, are there county taxes? I guess you can have an additional tax per county, right?
Well, yeah, I guess that you could have local taxes, yeah.
Okay. But the idea being, I mean, in a way, sales tax is flat, isn't it, already?
Well, yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely county tax, because I know I went to the mall and I thought I was charged the wrong tax, but in Long Island, New York, I believe it's Suffolk County, there is no tax on clothing, or at least a reduced rate.
But if you go elsewhere, there is. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I got into a conversation, kind of, not really, more just, I don't know. It was a weird back and forth with Naomi Wolf on Twitter. And I don't know how. So all I was trying to do was at least have her think about this concept. She was complaining that with the new tax bill, she's not going to be able to write off as many things as a business owner, and she's going to lose money that way. Like she was able to write off, her home office and apparently she can't do that anymore. I don't know if that's true, but there were some things that she couldn't write off. Okay. And I don't know, like I was trying to explain that if there are savings for the business that you're running and there are less tax write-offs for you as an individual running the business, shouldn't we try to look at mathematically if these savings kind of add up? So for example, if for some reason your company pays $10,000 less in taxes this year, you're a small company, and you have $10,000 less of write-offs, then is there really an issue? You know what I mean? And I don't know if the numbers add up so cleanly, but I would like to think that by kind of taking government out of the tax, out of the process of taxing businesses and taxing people and giving write-offs and all this other stuff, that these things should balance out. And I kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, basically,
Interesting.
taxing businesses doesn't make any sense, because when you tax businesses, then you're just going to pass it on to consumers and employees.
I would say
decent point there. All right, well, I think that's pretty good. I think we all. Oh, I'm sorry, JP.
I was just gonna say, like the quick response I had to that was,
I was gonna say no. I didn't ask for any final thoughts on that. So I think it sounds like
oh yeah, the quick response I have to that is businesses paying taxes at some level at least kind of keeps them accountable like any person, I don't know. I would worry too much that if businesses didn't pay taxes, everyone would start a business and just write everything off to the business so that taxes wouldn't get paid. Like that would be a concern of mine. This
is the point of the consumption tax. When you have the consumption tax, then if anyone spends money on some sort of product, then that thing gets taxed. Just treat it like any other sales tax. So
the business would also pay the tax.
Yeah, on if it's a new product. Yeah.
Well, the business is collecting the tax.
No. I mean, in his model, I think what he's saying is that if I buy a TV, it's going to be $1,000 plus the tax. But if your company buys a TV, it's also going to be $1,000 plus the tax. So it's not.
Yeah, if you're buying something in retail, then yeah.
Right. So that makes sense. When you said that, you didn't think companies should pay tax.
I mean a corporate income tax.
An income tax. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of ways to. I know a lot of companies that don't pay any income tax, just from write-offs.
Yeah, so I think to Crow's point, if we had a flat sales tax that was pretty high and we just got rid of income tax, none of those companies could avoid paying their taxes because, I mean, to the extent that they make no consumptions, I suppose they could pay no taxes, but they're going to consume.
Yeah, I mean, well, would that involve like buying something at the wholesale level? Like if I buy something for $10 and resell it for $20, am I getting taxed on that $10?
That's a good question, bro.
Well, basically treat it like any other sales tax. So I'm saying that if you buy something at the end chain of a retail transaction, at the end of a retail chain, then it gets taxed. So if you're a business owner, for example, and you decide that you want to buy a TV for your waiting room, then yeah, you'd still get taxed on that for a sales tax. But if, for instance, you decided to buy some inventory, then that wouldn't get taxed because that's wholesale. It's not the end of a retail chain.
So one little, I don't know, cheat I think I can sense there is what if I decided, wow, I really like video games. I'm going to open up a video game store and just buy a bunch of video games at wholesale.
Yeah, you would have to actually incorporate. So you couldn't just do that in your home. You have to
incorporate. But I would sell.
Everyone can make a corporation.
Yeah, I would sell. I would try to sell them too, but because it's profit, why not? But at the end of the day, I'm just basically taking all of the video games that I'm getting wholesale. I don't know. Maybe this is too much.
In my industry, they try to tax at the manufacturer, wholesaler, and the end of the chain, which is the store. on top of it to the customer, and it just kind of, they tried it in Pennsylvania and they kind of ruined the industry there. So I don't know how that would work.
You should probably say what your industry is.
Oh, e-cigarettes.
Huh, interesting. Gotcha. Okay, guys, no, that makes sense. I think we kind of got that one thought through pretty well. So shift gears a little bit. The next thing I wanted to mention to you guys was I don't know who all is fans movie-wise with between those, but I wanted to mention firstly if anyone has seen the trailer, and also I looked over it and it looked pretty cool. The downside to that is a lot of people think that there might be some going on there. I hope not, but I just curious.
I don't know. I didn't hear the movie.
Infinity War?
Oh. I haven't seen the trailer. I don't know what that is.
So it's the next Marvel series. This was more of just I mean, not necessarily even for the movie itself. I was just curious if you guys thought thought that the Marvel / DC movies were going more PC, or if you thought that maybe you think that they're kind of trying to branch out and just and just see what happens kind of deal. So I'll throw it back to Duff real quick. Just get your thoughts real quick.
Yeah, no, I saw the trailer. And I think the worry for anyone who is currently a Marvel Comics fan is they might have gone double down on the diversity initiative kind of thing and forgotten that what makes a good character is that the character has evolved over time and that the reader has the opportunity to get to know them. So in the comics, they ran into the problem of dropping in a whole bunch of new superheroes, which were essentially reskins of old superheroes, when really what they should have been investing their time is creating newer superheroes who have compelling backstories. When it comes to the latest or the most recent Marvel films, I wasn't a big fan of Doctor Strange. I actually did like the current Thor movie. And I didn't really find too much to find disagreeable in terms of, is it content too PC? Are they trying to do the diversity Olympics? It's like, well, they did shake some things up, and that was cool. When it comes to Infinity War, though, my question would be, what would be considered problematic? If we're going to say that they're trying to appeal to sort of diversity initiatives and PC culture, what would hurt the movie? And I don't think there's going to be that much different here than what we saw in both the first and second Avengers films, which is that there's some characters whose power levels shouldn't put them in the same category as, say, a Thor, a Hulk, a Captain America. And so we gave them the CG enough to make them look relevant. And I think a lot of diversity warriors would say the problem is that the beneficiaries of that jacking up in power have mostly been the female characters like Black Widow, who really shouldn't be in the same power category as some of those other major heroes, but they're really trying to make her seem like she is. But what are your guys' thoughts?
Go for it, Crow.
I don't watch movies anymore.
No, Crow. Why? Oh, that's just terrible. Okay, fair enough, JP.
I hate Hollywood, so there you go.
More time for me. No. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. I have not seen that trailer, and I didn't pick up on a particularly PC vibe from the previous Marvel, the Avengers movies, Iron Man and stuff. So I don't know if I wasn't watching hard enough or if it was subtle enough, but I didn't pick up on that. But you had mentioned DC, and does anybody here watch The Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, or any of them?
Yes, unfortunately.
I prefer to think that they don't exist.
Okay, hold on. But AAA, you said you do watch it?
I've not seen the most recent Arrow. I have seen I've not started I guess season 4 of Flash, and I've also seen seasons 1 and 2 of Supergirl because I thought it would get better, and I was disappointed entirely.
Okay,
so
yeah, when I started watching Supergirl, it was really clear to me that there was a lot of this like feminism, girl power kind of stuff. I still like I'm a superhero, like at least I like the DC comics, so I'm watching all of these shows, even though they're really getting on my nerves with the PC-ness. But I want to point out two things. The Flash. So The Flash recently had an episode where and as one episode, it's not that big of a deal, but all the guys went to a bachelor party, including The Flash, and he can drink a special drink, which will actually get him drunk. And they were incapacitated. and the girls had to solve the problem themselves. You know, there was like the one girl superhero and then the other two like non-superheroes. They figured it out. And they said out loud the words #feminism about 3 times in that episode, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh God.
One time I would have been like, all right, it's a nod to that fan base, to that. But it was just like over the top. That was the first one. And I know it lost a lot of people. But this week they had a big crossover between the 4 DC shows. And the crossover, the plot goes something like this. There is an Earth 53, I guess. I think there were 52 Earths, but now there's a 53rd one called X. And on Earth X, the Nazis developed the, the atomic bomb first, and they won the war, right? So this entire crossover is about how Nazi versions of the superheroes came from this other planet, and there's like this huge conflict, right? That would have been fine. But the amount of virtue signaling, there was in the first episode, because it was like a 4-episode long thing, they basically went in a circle just talking about how much they hate Nazis, which, okay, maybe you should hate Nazis, but already I was picking up on the fact that it was a nod to the kind of current liberal narrative right now. They made a reference to the melting pot, and they said it in a very condescending way. And if people don't know, like, apparently nobody likes melting pot anymore. It's got to be a salad bowl or multiculturalism. That melting pots are against kind of like the liberal. Yeah. And then this was my favorite. They were arguing with the Nazi versions of themselves, and they were saying how awful the Nazis are, how here, we are much, they were basically saying how we treat people with respect, blah, 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 blah. And the Nazis turned around and they're like, well, on our Earth, we do everything by meritocracy. And they basically equated meritocracy with Nazism, which I think is incredibly unfair. But if you know anything about kind of, at least I've been in many of arguments of how meritocracy is not a good thing. And, obviously on the left, meritocracy is not a good thing. Nazism is not a good thing. So I feel like this show is just looking for a way to conflate the two, and it did it. And then just to wrap up, after they resolved the whole conflict, some of the people went back to their original Earth X, and and he's made a comment like, well, I guess I'm going to go back to my Earth and punch some Nazis. and the Flash is like, yeah, I could definitely go for punching some Nazis too. And it was just like so obviously mirroring the language of the left right now that, I don't know, it was just so much of it over 4 episodes that it made me cringe. That's all. But those were the examples.
Yeah. Is it all right if I jump in there, Triple A?
Please.
Yo, yes.
Yeah. No, I love DC and Marvel, but I don't love what has been happening with their properties, or particularly with their comics, because they keep on forgetting that what makes good comic heroes and comic villains is their flaws. And they keep on trying to portray a lot of the female heroes as having none. And that makes them Barbie dolls in plastic, the very things which they're saying that you shouldn't think of women as being. And what drives me nuts, I'm going to pick on Black Widow for a second again. Scarlett Johansson physically is only about 5'4", maybe a little taller. And they have her fighting guys who are significantly bigger, and she's winning because girl power.
I know.
I see that as an affront to good female martial artists. I think I've brought this up before, but in season 2 of Daredevil, the actress who they got to play Elektra was also Red Ninja in G.I. Joe, and she is a fabulous martial artist. She's about 5'9". She's very athletically built, but what they did so well in Daredevil is acknowledge that both heroes had limitations. And so when Elektra was fighting guys, if it was like 2 6'8" dudes, she would trade off with Daredevil so that he could fight them head on while she would sneak around behind and stab them, which is strategically good. But because she was also a taller woman and obviously in good shape, when she beat a guy, it was believable. When you have somebody like Scarlett Johansson laying people out, it sort of gets that uncanny valley thing, and once again, I think it actually discredits women who have worked hard enough to be good at martial arts or good at what they do, because you're essentially bringing everybody down to the level of the person who can't fight. In the same way, what drives me nuts about what they do with Superman, my favorite continuity is the one where the Kryptonians themselves were actually probably the most racist people in their particular galaxy, had been banished to their planet because of the Red Sun. And Jor-El was very, very rare in that he looked out into the universe and said, there's actually interesting people out there, and I wish to send my son to them, because at least there he could be a beacon to people. Versus if he's here, he's stuck in sort of our infighting and our colonialness kind of thing. So they forget that what makes our characters worth watching is the fact that they're conflicted and flawed. And for Supergirl, of all people, to be standing up against the Nazis should have been one of the biggest aha moments, because she actually has the memories of what it was like on Krypton. And so she should be able to say, actually, I totally understand these people and where they come from, and I wish to fight against it, because I think there is a beauty to diversity. But I don't think they explored that in any real depth.
That's very, very no. That's awesome. Sorry, I just wanted to say to add on to that, Duff. Yeah, I definitely agree with your statement there with Elektra. I don't know. I loved. I think it was in season 1 of Daredevil. He's saving a kid, and there's one scene which you just remind me of where he is in the hallway, and I think the goal is to get to the end of the hallway and save someone. But I love that scene because you can see him. He gets there. He's kind of tired. He beats everyone around him. He's exhausted. You can tell he's falling over, but he's still going on. It's just very cool to see the fact that it's, as opposed to all the Marvel films of, oh yeah, we're just gonna go keep going. It's like, no, he's tired. He's throwing himself there. He takes a break. He's bleeding. He's he wants to go to bed basically, and they're just kind of like, well, he's got to go do this one thing. And so there's a scene where he's just kind of panting for just, I'm done. This is ridiculous. And so that adds to the, okay, I can believe you would fight XYZ people. Now you're tired. You're a human being. Whatever else. And then to add to what JP was saying, I was going to say, I have not seen that episode you're talking about, JP, but I wanted to say that there was one episode, I think it was the finale in season 2 of Supergirl, that really threw me off, mainly because, and I'm guessing everyone here has seen or heard of Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, and her, I think it was the hashtag She Persisted or something in those lines during after the election, but anyway, in the episode of that, I forget the whole plot, but I remember the bad guy was going to kill everyone on Earth or something in those lines and make it the new Krypton, and she had to stop some way or whatever. But anyway, the last scene the last part of the episode was they gave Superman, because Superman comes into Supergirl every now and he guest stars, but he had him come in, and he was supposed to be tricked that Kara, and so they fought each other. Well, in the episode, he kicks his ass, and then the episode's called Nevertheless, She Persisted, which pissed me off. But just the idea of Superman being tricked, maybe I can believe that, but him being beaten the way they showed it, no, that's not like she can get a few punches in there, but there's no way that she is going to be able to take him down like she did. And so that whole thing was just.
And the bigger point,
stupid and all.
The bigger point I guess you're making is that it felt very fake, and it felt like they did it for the reason of girl power. Is that? It's
right, and I hate the show. I mean, even from the beginning till now, it's always been this like, oh yeah, well, I'm just gonna be this cutesy whatever, and then I'm gonna show them this. And the enemies are weak because they have to be weak because Supergirl can't fight them, and her friends are like, oh yeah, this, and so she tries to come off as this. Powerful individual, which she is, but I mean, she's the add-on. Like everyone else does stuff. She kind of comes. It's like they give her an assist, and she puts the basket in, but she really just finishes the job. She's good to be there.
I would say
it's really a fashion contest. Sorry, what?
I would say when dealing with Kryptonians, we can't apply the same kind of rules. Like we don't know. Supergirl. The girls could be stronger on Krypton, or they could be just as, you know what I mean? Like, We don't know.
That is sure.
But
Yep.
I think more so
it's
what
stupid.
you're probably picking up on is just this idea that, and I think Duff already pointed to this, is they're not making the story interesting at all. It's like they're just trying to show like, oh, she's a girl, of course she's going to win, and that's not the message, or it shouldn't be the message.
Well,
because nobody's of course going to win because of who they are,
Well, that's the thing. They should win because of what has made them who they are. So, unfortunately, Supergirl has, in the current canon, been said to be more powerful than Superman. They've bent over backwards to try and make her even more powerful. And to the discredit of the character, once again, what would be cool is if Supergirl is faced with Superman and therefore has to outthink him. And we can believe it that she basically, let's say, we take a contrived circumstance, has to fight him, realize can't beat him one-on-one in a straight-up battle. So keeps on getting him away from areas in the world that are populated, so they know they're not going to level cities, but eventually gets to a bunker in the middle of, let's say, Area 51, drills down and suckers Superman into going straight into the bunker after her, and that's the room that's full of kryptonite. And so she drags herself out of the room and shuts the door because Superman didn't know what he was getting into. And suddenly she's beaten him with her wits, and it makes perfect sense. Whereas it's like, no, I can only smash and you can smash too. It's like, no, the hero has to have depth. And the hero should always be at a disadvantage because if they're not, why should we care?
Yeah, but I
true.
will be devil's advocate and say, since they're Kryptonian, the female-male dynamic might not be, you know what I mean? Like you might actually be able to put that aside. Like I wouldn't expect Tony Stark to really put up a fight against Wonder Woman, because she's a god.
What I would say there, the problem, I can't grant that because I followed the continuity resets too closely. And the continuity resets seem to be scaling more to do because of political pressure than what the original intent was. So
Right.
You could totally say within canon that if Kara knew she was going to be fighting a fellow Kryptonian, she goes to a blue sun and sits there for a day, then goes and fights them. So she's basically a super powered Kryptonian. Or she's smart enough that she goes and grabs a Red Lantern ring, at one point which she had, which can simulate red sun, and then go and fight Superman. So
what in the canon indicates that Kara, without a blue or red sun, without a blue sun, and her cousin without a blue sun, what in the canon indicates that he's necessarily stronger than her?
Well, see, this is the problem. So if we're dealing exclusively with New 52, he's not. And the reason why is because they both got sent away from Krypton at the same time. Her father's craft didn't crash and kept her in low orbit over the sun for a further 25 years. 25 years of more direct sun radiation, therefore she's more powerful. Prior to that, though...
Well, that was the story in the CW one as well. She got stuck.
Oh, yeah.
And when she arrived, she was older, actually.
Yeah, that's New 52 canon. Prior to that, though, the canon explanation was actually that Jor-El had played around with Superman's DNA, and therefore he was a super Kryptonian anyways, versus Kara, who was just a Kryptonian. But once again, we're getting down way too many foxholes. So, AAA, can you please move us to the next topic?
Yes, that's fine. Any final... Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, just really short. I haven't watched too many shows. But I do think that we need more rated R movies like Deadpool. I definitely enjoyed The Punisher. I think everyone had flaws in that TV show. I didn't like the watering down of the Nazis, since we were talking about that. The watering down of the Nazis in Wonder Woman, where I understand some countries like Germany, you can't show films with swastikas, but I think everyone's adults, and I don't think they should water that down. And can we just get a really good Hulk movie this time? I don't know what they're doing with it.
Hey, Ragnarok wasn't too bad, for the record. Okay. Well, good. Well, I think we've definitely covered now. So no, I think we're gonna change gears once again and go back to a bit more political stuff. The next thing I wanted to mention real quick here was the yeah, we do. The next thing I wanted to mention here was I'm assuming you guys might have heard about the Mr. Flynn and how he was uh, lying and all that business. I think was kind of for us to know about what was going on now, and we can hopefully move on from this whole thing. Any thoughts about the Flynn debacle there, Duff?
Actually, I would pass this off to some of the other panelists there. So, John, do you actually have anything to say on the Flynn case?
I don't know much about it. Tell me what's going on.
I'll pass it to Crow first. Crow, have you got any insight?
Yeah, basically what happened was Flynn he basically decided to just take a charge of lying to the FBI because it was a lesser charge, and basically he tried to avoid a more serious charge of some sort of international conspiracy. So he just decided to just take a charge of lying to the FBI as a sort of cop-out bargain.
Because of the collusion, right?
Because basically because of Russia stuff, so something like that.
Is the conclusion that there was collusion, or is he just taking a hit?
He's just taking a hit
so that we don't actually know conclusively either way.
Because he doesn't want to have to go. He doesn't want to have to go through the trial and everything. So he just wants to take a lesser hit and get a lower charge.
But I would understand why people would then think of him as guilty for not fighting it.
Yeah, but hey, whatever. I don't care.
Actually, AAA, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think that well, firstly, let's go down get to the just pretend that everything that happened. Okay, let's say he was colluding. Well, as I understand it, even if he was colluding every day with the Russians, that's not illegal. So that's getting information and talking, which yeah, it doesn't look great, but there's no law against that kind of thing. And it sounds as though, yeah, he's trying to go say, yeah, it happened, moving on kind of deal. And I'm sure people on the left are going to go, oh, hey, this proves that blah, blah, blah happened and stuff. But at the same time, there's as other things have been pointed out before, there's more proof during this investigation that points to Hillary Clinton doing wrong, actually having influenced the election more than Trump ever did. So as Mr. Shapiro has pointed out, I think there's a lot of smoke and no fire, and I don't think that this is about more or less. So I don't know, guys. JP or Crow, any thoughts on if this actually is going to make a difference?
I don't think it will. I don't think people care.
Well,
yeah,
I want to challenge Crow a little bit because if it was switched, if it wasn't, if this was Hillary in office and somebody took the same plea deal, I suppose, that Flynn took on her cabinet, would you feel the same way? Would you be like, I don't really care?
I really wouldn't, because I don't think that government is a benevolent institution. So I'm not surprised when people in government are fuck ups. That's basically how I see it.
But even fuck ups, like that's interesting.
You're basically you're overestimating how much how much confidence I put in government. Whenever government,
I'm sure you don't put it. I think of government as people. It's just other people. They just happen to have that role in our society. I don't think that they earned it through any kind of moral test. It's certainly not.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting because if he lied to the FBI as a way to avoid the whole Russia collusion thing, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess, is that the only crime he committed? Because as somebody was just pointing out, it seems simply talking to Russia about the country even is not actually illegal.
Well, is it the whole idea that he said he didn't speak to them, and now there's proof that there was a dialogue? Or
yeah, that's basically it.
But it's a one of the top nations. I don't see any wrongdoing.
Well, you shouldn't have lied to the FBI.
Well, there's two things that I'd add to the conversation that we haven't really touched on yet. First, what made it such a stink within the last 3 days is the NBC ran a story that essentially was saying that he was going to say that I colluded with Russia, meaning I intended to sell American secrets to Russia in order to get something in return, which is not what he said at all. What he said is, I have spoken to Russian individuals in the capacity as an employee for Donald Trump and in the capacity in the employ of myself and my own business interests, which is different. And so the stink comes around what the left was trying to do with it and say, like, oh, look, this proves that he's a traitor. When all he's really said is, okay, what I said initially under oath was I did not collude with Russia. And he hasn't. But can he deny that he has worked with Russia and had business deals with them and done so as a member of the Trump team? No, he can't actually say that. So the lie is not about the severity of his interaction, but that he had interactions. So it's actually a much lesser charge because it doesn't bring about, what's the charge of betraying your nation? What's
Treason.
that term?
Treason.
Treason. It's not treasonous what he's pleading to.
Well, even if he did buy information from Russia, wouldn't that also depend on whose orders?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. The amount of stuff which is going on within this context makes it less severe, because you totally could buy information from Russia. The thing is, it's not treasonous until you actually sell them state secrets. And at no point did he say, or did he, sell state secrets as far as we know to this point. And under the auspices of working for Trump, he didn't do that either. But he did lie to the FBI and say he did not talk with the Russians, which is provably false.
Right. And just to take it a step further, even if I'm sure that there are legal ways to even sell secrets to Russia. So it would have to have been done in a way that was out of his line of command or something, presumably.
Yes, for sure.
Interesting stuff.
Makes sense. Damn. Any final thoughts there, John?
Well, it depends on probably the exact questions or how they went about it. As a businessman, I'm sure he's probably been over there plenty of times. But I think they have to dig a little further.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, have you ever spoken to Russia during these times and you're like, no, I have absolutely not for any reason whatsoever? And then it turns out, actually, what did come up? What do they know that he's had dialogues with Russia, but what was the content of it?
He was trying to go and promote himself and saying that he was in the Trump campaign and therefore he would be able to, just trying to get himself higher up. And people knew about that, and that's why they told Trump not to get him on the team. And Trump did it anyway. And so early on, they're like, hey, this is a bad idea, but whatever. So again, it doesn't look good, but it's nothing really happened. Would that be fair to say there, Duff?
Yeah, and I depending on how far back we go, because I think I'm mixing stories now. At one point, Trump's son-in-law was speaking with someone who had claimed to be a Russian ambassador or someone on behalf of the Russian consulate, which turned out not to be true. So there was a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. And all I can think of is Putin at some levels like, I'm going to screw with everybody and just laugh as America tears itself apart. And I think Putin, you have to give him a gold star for that, because he's officially managed to screw with both the Clinton side and the Trump side. And now America is basically chasing its own tail amongst its political elite. But I don't think there's too much more to go on. And as John says, we kind of have to wait now for the investigation to finish up. And maybe we'll find new evidence. But the real kicker is that NBC sold it as one bag of goods when in fact it was not.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's fair.
That to be expected at this time and climate.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Well, again, it's hard to say what's gonna happen now, just because it just recently happened. So we'll see if anything comes up of this. But lastly, I wanted to mention to you guys the ordeals involving NAFTA, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. I actually have a little bit less to give and start out with this one, but I'm going to throw it over to Duff and just say what were your thoughts on that?
Well, this might be a primarily Canadian concern, but right now the NAFTA negotiations have ground to a halt, particularly over Canadian cultural goods and our protection of Canadian cultural industries. And because of that, it's actually hurting the Canadian economy far more than it's hurting the American economy. But as a Canadian, I have to be on my government's side for trying to negotiate for these things because of what an economic powerhouse the U.S. is. We're already extremely dependent on the U.S. economy for the well-being of our own. But if we can't control at least some of the products which we produce and say that they're Canadian, then essentially we are the 52nd state. And, you know, as someone who grew up in Canada, it might already be true, but not in practice. And I would like to keep that illusion in place.
What's the 51st state? What's the 51st?
Okay, I guess I'm including Puerto Rico in there, eh?
Okay.
Well, if because of NAFTA, Canada is another state, I would say the other one would be Mexico because it involves them too.
Yeah, that's actually something which we could talk about quite a bit. So Mexico, if Canada right now says that the negotiations are stalled, Mexico is livid just because a lot of the language around production and how much Mexico could create and import into the States without having a tariff levied against it apparently is up for negotiation. And Mexico isn't happy with Canada because we're not really big on that. We have to have this percentage of stuff being traded between us and the States at a reduced tax rate. We're more about actually we want things like the WTO and arbitration agreements to be followed. Mexico hasn't been as big on arbitration because most of their cases tend to get lost.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm sorry, go ahead now, Crow.
So basically when it comes to NAFTA, I think that my basic view on free trade is that free trade is great. You know, I'm an advocate. I'm a huge advocate of free market economics. And a lot of people just don't seem to understand how employment works. So I guess basically my entire thing with NAFTA is just let's just trade. Let's just trade. No tariffs. Get the government out of it. Let's just trade. You know, so that's basically my view of NAFTA. Yeah, I wholeheartedly support just free trade between countries. But as a segue, I wanted to talk about another misconception of employment, because a lot of people seem to think that there's a zero-sum game with employment. So when it comes to, for example, automation, and this is another myth that people believe that automation kills jobs, even though there's no historical evidence whatsoever to support that notion. So, for example, let's take the textile industry. Most of the process to make textiles has been completely automated. But because of that automation, prices went down so much because of greater efficiency that it led to a higher demand for clothing. And since people bought more clothing, then the employment in the textile industry is actually higher than it's ever been, even though the process has been mostly automated. So it's counterintuitive, but automation improves employment, not the reverse.
I would even take it a step further and say it changes the kind of employment. I would imagine in the theoretical world where we have automated everything, like literally everything, what that's going to do is we'll basically live in a creator's economy. And I think your textile one is a great example because largely the reason there's so many different companies popping up making clothes is because it's fashion, it's art, it's creation. It's something like that is something beyond, you know, an assembly line or, you know, just trying to get a machine built or a car built. Now, you know, as cars were easier to build, now you get to dive into different styles, different colors, different tastes, different interiors, all this stuff. So I would say when you first started that, I was like disagreeing with you. I'm like, no, like if we automate things, it does kill jobs. But I think really what my brain is saying is it kills job in the traditional sense, and that we're creating this more what I think is a human market. I don't think humans should be doing jobs that are meant for machines.
Well, yeah, but even then, it's not just creativity. It's not just a change in employment. It's also just the fact that when you automate, it increases efficiency, so prices go down. And when things become less expensive, that increases demand. and more demand means you have to have more people. So even though only 2% of the textile process is human related, because of the dramatic decrease in prices in textiles, clothing became less expensive, people demanded more clothing, which means you have more employment in the 2% of the process left that's human related.
Okay, so you're saying you're making that argument without the creative piece.
Exactly, but your point does stand. I'm just saying that an increase in efficiency lowers prices, increasing demand, which increases demand for labor.
No,
yeah,
that's
so Crow's essentially saying it's employment relative to scale. So if you have 2% of people are employed and it's, let's say, 1 billion products produced, 2% of 1 billion, significantly higher than 2%, 1 million in terms of the production. So as a function, it still might be 2%, but that raw number increases as the efficiency increases as well.
Yeah, pretty much. Basically, if 2% of the process is human related, so if only 2% of the textile making process involves human employees, if people buy a lot more clothing because of the decrease in prices, then that 2% still leads to more employment. So
yeah.
it's counterintuitive, but it works.
It's interesting too that clothing, right? Because clothing, theoretically, the demand shouldn't go up. I mean, maybe more people can own a few pieces of clothing, but there's no real reason to keep buying clothes, especially if your body is generally staying the same as an adult. So I do think there's still like something to be said about the reason that demand is going up is because that resource, for some reason, is a consumable one. But for example, if it's automatedly like an iron, I don't think people buy a lot of irons. But if we can mass produce irons, I wonder, would you say that has kind of a different effect on the economy than mass producing, cereal, which is consumed every day?
Well, here's the thing. Cereal is a substitutable good. So, for example, you can replace cereal with any other grain product like bread or something. You don't have to consume cereal. But yeah, the bottom line is that when you increase efficiency, yes, you have a point where some products are different than others and some products are more inelastic than others. But basically, whenever you increase efficiency, prices go down, which leads to more demand. So even if only a small share of the process still involves humans, you still get more employment afterwards. And it's not just in the product itself, it's also in all the parts that make the product. For example, you have to not only have more people involved in the cereal making process, the farmers, but also the people in the logging industry who get the paper to make the cardboard. You have all the people who get the materials to make the ink for the boxes, for the labels and everything. So you have a lot more employment involved when prices go down. So it's counterintuitive, but robots lead to more jobs, not less.
And maybe the real concern then, and people aren't articulating it well, isn't that there won't be more jobs, but there will be less jobs that they can do, that they will feel unskilled to do. Obviously, this corrects within a generation or two, but and I don't really have sympathy. I'm just making the argument that somebody who grew up in one world and all of a sudden they need to know how to use a computer, they need to know how to use this thing. Like if 10 years from now you need to know how to use this like really bizarre new device that all the kids are using, that is going to have an effect on your personal potential in the workplace. But I think to your point, on a more global scale, it's collectively it's actually creating more jobs. So that's interesting.
Well, yeah, in the United States, there are plenty of job openings in skilled trades, but people just need to actually take them. Mike Rowe talks about this. The guy from Dirty Jobs. He has a scholarship fund for trade schools. If you want to give anyone advice, a young person who's thinks about going to college, for instance, tell them to go to trade school instead, because there are millions of trade jobs available right now, and they pay well. So
yeah, if your goal is to just get a job and pay your bills and stuff.
Yeah.
I think one of the most exciting automated industries is going to be the housing market, with 3D printers that are, using different materials. That it's going to reduce a lot of construction jobs, but it's going to open the market to new materials, and the fact that these 3D printers can build foundations and circular or curved arches that are actually stronger and could withstand stronger hurricanes and natural disasters. There's going to be a big savings of houses getting destroyed, like in Florida or the Keys. It's going to create so many of those creative jobs that you guys were talking about, because you could really go wild, with the designs. It's going to reduce a lot of waste. They've spoken about 80% on labor costs alone. The construction waste, at least 60%, and the time. They're going to be printing these houses really fast.
I saw they were using this in some like third world country where they were printing 3D houses out of clay, and it's so cheap. And I was just thinking, like, fuck, I would live in a clay house. I don't care.
That'd be pretty ridiculous. Any final thoughts there, Duff?
Oh no, for sure. I think Crow and JP and John have covered it, and I have no particular expertise in this particular topic. So whatever you guys want to do.
Okay, that works out. And just to real quick to add on there, I do know that was actually one of my I had a job interview recently about building structures and 3D printing, that kind of thing. And I do know that nowadays they are looking towards finding more machines to do not just 3D printing, but even the as my job, I have done some work in 3D modeling, and I'm seeing nowadays how a computer can look at a design model from a 3D design and pinpoint the floor plan where all the pegs go. And so now, as opposed to before, where it was lay concrete down, draw lines, dig a hole, put a pole in the hole, build the walls. Nowadays, it's almost they have a blueprint or a mold they just kind of fill with the concrete. So now they can say, hey, I know that a support needs to go here, so they leave a hole for the support, and then they save hours and a lot of money just by knowing exactly where to put things down. And it's really efficient. It does a great job, and they can they're very, very accurate, and they can get all this stuff done really fast. It's just one less thing to worry about, so it's pretty cool. But we've covered quite a bit tonight, and I think that's, I appreciate all of you guys joining me here, and I think, hopefully we can just see you next time. So, guys, we're going to probably close this out here now, but everyone say goodbye real quick. Okay?
All right, later.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night, guys.
All right, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Thank you.